Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Today I'm going to cover the top 10 cryptocurrencies by market cap. So we're going to look at the charts. We're going to go in depth one by one. We'll see. Maybe I'll cover the top 11 or 12. We'll see how we do on time, but at least the top 10. So I'm going to talk Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Ripple, Litecoin, IOTA, NEM, Dash, Neo, Monero, and maybe a few others. So let's get to it. Before we get started, a couple of quick items. First off, I just want to say thank you for being here, folks. We have 30,000 subscribers on this channel. I'm loving it. I'm loving the conversation. Many of you guys follow me on Twitter and get in the newsletter, so just awesome to have you. Appreciate every one of you guys and gals. And so a couple of things. First off, if you haven't seen Banking on Bitcoin, it's on Netflix. Pretty cool documentary on some of the origins of Bitcoin and some of the debate around the regulation of it and who was Satoshi Nakamoto and all that fun stuff. So check it out. It's a documentary. I'd recommend it, especially for you crypto enthusiasts. Another thing is I'm going to be talking charts today. I'm going to be talking technical analysis. That's what we do here. And if you're not familiar with my course, or if you're new to the channel, I do offer a course on technical analysis for cryptocurrencies. It's about 3.5 hours of video content and covers everything from basis, support, resistance, the basics of candlestick reading. So if you're brand new to it, that'll help you too. The chart patterns that I look for, some introduction to technical indicators, so all that fun stuff. It's $40. I've seen a lot of different courses out there, guys. Some of them over $1,000, some of them several $100s. And I mean, I'm biased when I say this, but I think for $40, you're getting a lot of value here. And I've gotten really good feedback on this, so I am going to stick to that. You can pay with credit card or PayPal right on the site. I was accepting Bitcoin, and I got to say, BitPay is my processor. I'm going to call you guys out. I'm having some issues with them, so BitPay support, if you're listening, I've been trying to email you guys. I need some help here. If not, we're going to do something else. In the meantime, guys, if you want to pay with crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, whatever, shoot me an email in the contact form. I'd be happy to coordinate with you guys. So let's get to it. So first off, Bitcoin, $71.8 billion market cap. That's incredible. So we're at $4,350 right now. Let's take a look at the charts. So I'm going to start off with the daily chart. So this is kind of the broad picture view first, right? And we have these nice long periods of consolidation, which I like because this is a big long base. Now, I don't like the pullback, but when things pause, it sets up what I call a base. And this is wonderful because it basically provides a new level of consolidation, a new floor, if you will, which is a springboard for the next move up. And so from the last base, and this really started to launch on August 1st. I mean, we had the fork here, we had a little bit. So we had the breakout just shortly after the hard fork. And since that point, we ran up 55%. That's a huge move for Bitcoin. So we went from 2,900 up to, here recently 44, right near the old highs now. And we've been consolidating here for the last week and a half or so. And so let's zoom in on that most recent base. So here's what I like to see. The 10 EMA is catching up. These other moving averages are starting to get close. We had a nice shakeout recently, and that, if I pull up the RSI, was helpful to kind of take off some of that over bullishness we had here. So on the daily chart, not looking too bad here. And so if we go to the 4-hour chart, I'm liking this base right here personally. We're knocking on the doors of the old highs, the old all-time highs here. And so what I'm looking at when I see this is I'm liking this big consolidation we had here, run up right back to the old highs, and now we're putting a little bit of a handle, if you will, which is what you typically expect to see as we approach the old highs, because there was a lot of buyers and sellers right here, and that was our level of resistance. So this is looking good. I mean, we hit this level, we hit this level again, we had this big pullback, this was a nice little washout, we had this big hammer reversal, a lot of volume came in there, which was support, a lot of buyers, and since then we've just been marching up, hit the old high, and then bam, little shakeout. So what you're going to probably see here is some pulling in here, and if this bull run is going to keep having legs, this is going to be a normal constructive pullback. and then what'll happen is we're going to have this little pop to the upside, hit the old highs. And if that happens, guys, I mean, I'm expecting this guy to run. If we have this breakout here, I mean, you can very quickly see $5,000. So not saying that's going to happen, but the probabilities are very high right now. The way this pattern is setting up after this nice little base we've had over the last couple of days / week and a half, this is normal action, and that's what I'm expecting to see. So the question's going to be is, if Bitcoin breaks out and starts to run and crosses 5,000, what are the altcoins going to do? Are they going to hold par with Bitcoin and run, or is money going to move out of Bitcoin and start, or out of alts and start rushing into Bitcoin? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And if the opposite happens and this starts to break down, what I'd be looking for is some support around, you know, this $3,700 mark. That's going to be solid level. It has to hold. If that doesn't hold, then you might have like this big double top situation, which would not be good. At this point, that's probably the least likely scenario, but hey, anything can happen in crypto space. I'm expecting more upside. So coming in at number 2, Ethereum. So if we look at Ethereum, here's the daily chart going back to late May, and we've had this nice long consolidation that's been happening. And since the bottom here, we're up pretty decent since the bottom. But even since August 1st, if you look at the breakouts, I mean, we're up. Right now, Ethereum's up 43% versus the US dollar. So that's just holding basically with the move that Bitcoin's been making here. But Ethereum's looking pretty good. Now, I like this up and then pause and slow up. I know we all want to see Ethereum quickly go to 400 and 500. But the thing is, if we want this bull market to last, it's very healthy to see these big rises followed by these periods of consolidation and maybe some slow, steady gains, because that is going to be sustainable for a longer period of time, versus when you see these big run-ups where it goes from $96, you know, up to $300-400 in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, that's eventually that has to work itself out with a big correction like we're seeing already. So I like these longer, these slower moving. They're not as exciting, but they're just a little more sustainable. And you know, when you look at it in the realm of investing, I mean, that's fantastic returns. Even in 21 days, you're up 30%. I mean, so I know versus crypto, we're a lot more volatile, and you want the big gains because it offsets some of the big downside risk, but that's still not bad. So the levels I'm looking for on Ethereum is basically the current level it's at right now. This little zone around 330, 340. That's going to hit up some key resistance here, and you've seen some selling here recently as it approaches, but we're really starting to tighten up here. And so I think if Bitcoin can break out and start clearing all-time highs and moving higher, you're going to see Ethereum move in sympathy with it. The next level above that is just right above at 360, 370, and then above that is the all-time highs around $400 or so. And if we can clear that here, I mean, you're going to be at all-time highs in Ethereum, and I've said it before, I think we're going to go higher versus Bitcoin. And so that's going to push us beyond that all-time high. And right now that's 18-20% above where we're at right now. So certainly reasonable and in the realm of possibility. The only thing I'd like to see is a little bit more volume showing up here on the upside as it starts to move higher. All in all, you're seeing that longer-term moving average starting to turn north here, and you're seeing these other ones moving along with it. So I can't complain. If we zoom in a little bit here, got to take a closer look. You can see we're right there. We try to have this big breakout, pulled in, big selling, but this found this support. Since then, just kind of been marching along. We're approaching that high where that breakout happened a few days ago, and we're right there now. So let's see if we can get above that again. If we can clear 350, that's going to be a really good sign for Ethereum. We'll see some more upside there. Coming in at number 3 is Bcash. Now there's going to be a lot of argument and debate whether or not they deserve to be number 3 based on the fact that they created that value just off of a fork. And I get that, and philosophical reasons aside, just looking at the technicals, it did have a very nice run here. We had the initial pop, all the selling came in when everybody was unloading their Bitcoin Cash, and then it put in this really tight consolidation, and we saw that big breakout, huge run up. I mean, that essentially took us from just shy of $300 all the way up to about 9 something before it topped. That was a 200% move on Bitcoin Cash. Since has been pulling in, but look at these moving averages. They're just now starting to really consolidate here. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bitcoin Cash does here. We're at this little juncture where it's holding these lows that it put in here recently. So that around 570 to $600 mark is kind of that support area. We're just above that right now. So if Bitcoin Cash stays above this 570 to 590 area as it consolidates, it could set up another base and another move higher. I was looking at a little bit of a descending trend here, and it has since resolved itself, but now it's just kind of flattening out here. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bitcoin Cash does, especially if Bitcoin starts to clear and make all-time highs here. There's just some back and forth between block mining difficulty, and that's moving mining hash power back and forth. And so there's a lot more to it than just the technicals at this point. There's a lot of news and fundamentals that's driving some of this, but volume's really drying up on this consolidation. So I'm watching that, because when I see that, look at how tiny the volume's getting down here. There's just not a lot of sellers showing up right here. And so it's found a level of support. Now it's at a key level, so it certainly could just crack this technically and have a big sell down. But right now it doesn't look like it's doing that. So keep an eye on it. If you want to trade this, if you want to maybe profit on a potential upside, I'm not holding any, just to be clear, I'm not holding any Bitcoin Cash right now, but the levels I'd be looking for are these levels here. Let me pull up my bar here. There was a lot of sellers that showed up in this 670 to 700 zone, but near term we try to pop it here and they couldn't. So that's the level I'm looking at, right? The 660 area. If we can close above that, then the next level to look for is just above 700. And above that, we could have a pretty decent move up if we start to clear those levels. So I'm watching this one. Again, more of a trade. I'm not a believer in Bitcoin Cash long term. It's just not in my core portfolio. But if I see a little bit move here, it could turn into a 20-30% gain. If you go over to the coin market cap and we look at where it's at, it's $10 billion. So it's, it's held up pretty well, and it's $636 right now. And we were all negative on it and went down to 200 and popped back up. So it'll be interesting to see what Bitcoin Cash does here in the coming months. Number 4, Ripple. So Ripple has had some interesting moves here. Let's go to the charts. So here's a look at Ripple on the USDT. And this is the daily chart. And, since peaking way back in mid-May, it's really done nothing but just kind of march straight down, and it bottomed around 14 cents. And you could see that it had this multiple low here where it started to bottom out, and the first time it hit that was early mid-July, and then it just kind of has been consolidating since. And in the last couple of days we just saw this massive move up to the upside. Certainly made for some good trading long term. I know you guys, there's a lot of Ripple fans out there. I'm not a personal fan of Ripple long term, just for a number of reasons. The supply issue, the market segment that it's really going after. But it certainly could keep going up. Ripple has been a leader. There's some institutional demand there behind, there's some big money behind it. And I get that. And they've got a pretty good team. So it's one to definitely keep an eye on. But it had some moves here, and it's just, there's different things driving it, some news about it being moved to different exchanges, some further growth and customer base and all that. So I believe that was the bottom. I think that was a good low for Ripple here. It's since moved up on the daily charts, had this pretty decent pullback, but this is a normal expected pullback, probably a little sharper than you'd like to see, but notice how it's just hitting these moving averages, and you're seeing that a lot here recently. You see these big pops and then these sharp pullbacks, and it's kind of cycling through. And we'll look at some other charts here, but you saw it with Zcash, you saw it with Dash, you saw it with Monero, and they kind of have this big pop and sharp pullback before they start heading higher. But if you go from the peak where it was around 29 cents to the low just hit here recently, that's a 32% pullback. And that's kind of normal for some of these pullbacks. It's a lot, but it's kind of normal, especially after going up that much. If you look at from the bottom to where it topped out at, that's 100%. And so what would I do with Ripple here? I'm watching it closely. There's a lot of selling still. You see these long wicks. Every time it starts to pop above this 25-cent mark, there's a lot of selling showing up. So if we go to the 4-hour chart on this one, you can see the 10 EMA starting to pull in, and it's starting to become a level of resistance. So if Ripple's going to go higher, it's going to have to hold these lows here around the 21 cent mark. It better hold that, because if we start to break down, especially with the moving averages starting to turn down, you could see further downside. And there has been a lot of selling. I mean, look at this big red bar. That's just pure selling there, pure selling there. I mean, this is a little bit of a support bar, but this is the key area that it's in right now. So on the upside, I think it's just going to face a lot of resistance, and you can certainly make some trades, but until it breaks this 29 and ultimately the 31 cent mark, there's probably not going to be a lot to do for me personally. These levels have been a key resistance zone for a long time, and I think if we can get above that, then yeah, you might start seeing a pretty decent move in Ripple. So just very volatile right now. Makes for some good trading if you like doing that. As far as a longer term holding, this could potentially be an entry point if you think that was the low, and if you're a believer in Ripple longer term, you know, keep an eye on it here. If it starts to march higher, this is a pretty decent pullback. That might be a good entry point longer term. Number 5, Litecoin, another one that has had this breakout, maybe fake out move. Let's go look at the charts on Litecoin, and I know Litecoin can frustrate some people, and has been doing it for several months now, it seems. Let's go to the GDAX and look at Litecoin. I'm going to look at Litecoin versus the dollar. And so I've put in some levels of resistance here over the last couple of days. So let's look at the daily chart first. And so I like the daily chart. I mean, on versus the dollar, I get it's been underperforming Bitcoin, but versus the dollar, just really putting in this long and becoming tight base. And here's the thing with bases. The longer and the tighter that they get like this, and more constructive, if and when they finally break out, they typically result in some pretty nice moves to the upside. And so there's, you know, it's a hard game to be that patient when you're looking at something just basically all of July and most of August just sitting tight, doing nothing. Other things are running up. But you can't lose sight of some of these, especially when they're in the top 10, because if they have a move, it's going to be fast and it's going to be big. And we've seen it with Litecoin, where it has these big moves and it pops them up, and then it just sits tight for a long time, and then it pops them up. So you want to be ready, and sometimes you have to be early to catch those because they move fast and they move quick. That being said, we had this move the other day. I think it's a pretty solid breakout. I'm still liking it, but we're at a critical juncture here. But the volume on that move was very nice, very big on the upside. The pullback has been constructive. You see that volume just starting to inch down with every candle on the way down, and it's just getting smaller as this little pullback happens. The 10 EMA is starting to catch up, so we could see that hit. And so this first line is really that early entry breakout point that I was watching. That $47 to $50 mark was the mark I really wanted it to see. And so far, it's not breached it to the downside. So it's not uncommon to see a breakout, pull back right to the breakout point, and then head higher. The other level I'm looking at is this resistance back here, and it tried to get above it, has since not been able to close back above that again. That's $52.50 there. And then we see the old all-time highs, and you can see the candle there was kind of lining up with the body here of these wicks. So a couple of levels to look at, but let's zoom out a little bit and look at on the breakout side. If we do start to break out, what percentage are we here? So let's say this level holds and we start to move higher. I mean, just to get to this last line of defense here, that's just shy of 10%. Then on this chart, the old high is 15% above us. You could see that happen in one candle, right, on a day. It could just pop right through all of those levels pretty quickly. Above that, if this is just me guessing, but I think if we break out and we start seeing all-time highs, we're going to see $70 plus Litecoin, and that's going to be a 35+% move. We've seen that in the past, so there's precedence for that, but keep an eye on it. So I mean, I like the way it's setting up here. It's had the pop, now pulling in. What I wouldn't want to see again is a break below 50 and closing below it, and certainly not below this 10 EMA. If that happens, then that's a failed breakout, and typically that's very bearish, and you can start to see it really head south after that. So I'm watching it. I do have some Litecoin. I'm keeping an eye on it, but I am optimistic, thinking that this is a decent pullback, and we're going to start to inch higher. Maybe it just does in Ethereum and starts to march along, but once something is above old highs and is in blue skies, they tend to start really moving at that point because there's no resistance. There's nobody holding it that is underwater, and there might be some profit taken as we start to approach these, $57, $58 mark. But once we get past that, it could really start to move fast. Number 6, IOTA. So IOTA has been very strong here since the fork, and it has gone from 29 cents or so up to about $1 before pulling in here recently. So let's see if how it's looking on the charts. So here's the daily chart of IOTA. And so since that breakout we had here right on August 1st, essentially, we had this little pop, we just marched up very nice and constructively. Probably one of the cleanest up moves I've seen in a long time, especially in cryptocurrency. I mean, it was just, there's one red bar there and one here, and it was just all just green days for a long time. And that took us up, let's see here, 275% in about 13 days. So very nice move. It was due for a pause, and I expected that around $1. We've seen since that started to see that pullback. Saw some big volume come in here. They tried to shake it down, and it was support. So on the downside, this level has held several times. Let's just call it 75 cents or so, but that area has really held support. So if you're in it, I'd be watching that zone right there. You don't want to see it get too much further below that, and certainly this 30-day EMA is going to start catching up to the line soon. So that's probably about as much as I'd give it to the downside, because if it breaks that, I mean, you just never know how far down it's going to go. If we do a Fibonacci retracement on this, let's look at that move here since the breakout. If we do that Fibonacci on here, it could hit that 618 if it starts to break down, and that's going to take you down to about 58 cents. So it just depends on how much profit you're willing to risk there. I know there's a lot of long-term believers on IOTA. It's got some very interesting technology and what they're trying to do with the blockchain and the Tangle and all that. And so has some potential if they can really start pulling all that off. So I like it. I like IOTA. It's kind of consolidating right here, and it's very good, especially after that big move it had, 275% in 13 days. That's a very big move. So it needs to hold out. And if it can just start building this base right around here, between this 80 cents to $1 or so mark, that's going to be very nice. On the upside, I know it was looking earlier today like it wanted to start moving. I don't think it's ready yet. I think it needs to consolidate more, but start keeping an eye on the upside here if you like it. What it could be doing here potentially is starting to form this little base, and it could start rounding out. If you start seeing the right side of the base start to form, then the early entry you're going to want to look at here as far as confirmation goes is, can it start closing above that 93 cents on a consistent basis, and then above that, these areas here around $1. So those are the levels I'm watching on IOTA for the upside and on the downside. I think it's got some more consolidation to go, and it's all healthy and very good. So let's see if it can just continue to consolidate here and start to base out. Number 7, Dash. Again, Dash had a very nice breakout after a little bit of a base here. So we're sitting at $327 Dash, $2.45 billion market cap, right on the heels of IOTA and Litecoin. So, if Dash has a big move up here, you could see it just leapfrog all the way to number 5 again. So let's keep an eye on that one. Let's go look at the charts here. So first chart is the daily chart of Dash versus Bitcoin. And so you can see it's versus Bitcoin, it's still not cleared its all-time highs, but it's certainly looking very good here. You're starting to see this level right around here being the area you're going to want to see it clear. If it does that, you're going to see another leg up versus Bitcoin. Now, if we zoom in a little bit and look at the 4-hour chart here, let me clear that line. This is actually looking really nice. So we had this big run up, and this was a massive bar. I mean, just huge move up in a matter of 4 hours, right? I mean, it's just a quick move up, 34% pop to the upside. Then it had a pretty decent pullback, but look at where it held, right on that pullback, right above that 10 EMA, and seems to be where it holds, but volume on the downside was bigger than on the upside. So that's typically a little bit of a warning flag. To be honest, that's what has kept me away from Dash. I saw this big breakout, but I didn't pick any up just because I saw the big sell-off, and I was thinking this is a big pump and they're going to start to crash it down, but it hasn't really crashed. And in fact, as time passes, it's starting to look pretty good here. So you can see it had this big pullback, went right back up to that old high, and now that's become a line that we're going to really want to watch. But you can see this consolidation right here is just looking very nice, very tight. The moving averages are starting to catch up. So on the upside, this area on the BTC, 0.077 around there. If we go to the dollar, let's see how it looks on there. And it's starting to hit new highs on the dollar, especially with the strength we're seeing in Bitcoin. So this is looking really good. Looks like it's going to break out here versus the dollar now. It's moving to new high territory. So $325 dash, and has had quite the move in just the last couple of days here. If we look at the longer term daily chart, I mean, these are the type of things you want to look for. And admittedly, the base was not very clean. It's kind of all over the place. But when you see these old highs, you know, hit, pulls back, hit, pull back, and it starts to tighten up around these old highs, you know, pay attention. And it had this breakout out of the 200 area, pulled back in, and I thought, no, that's a failed breakout, hit the 10 EMA, and then had this massive move up, and now we're starting to march up. So very bullish right now, very strong still. So any pullbacks of the 10 EMA at this point are buyable in my opinion, and I think Dash is looking like it wants to go higher. Number 8, NEM. So here's a daily chart of NEM. Now NEM has been very volatile, very rocky here. You know, it was looking really strong, had this nice run up. I personally really like the project NEM, and I want to see them succeed. But there's certainly a lot more competition now in this space. There are the platforms and some of the things they're trying to do, smart contracts and all that. There's just more and more competition for that. And so they've got to start doing some things right if they're going to want to see this start to increase in value. And I think they are. They're launching some things here near term. So some of the areas to look for on NEM. This area clearly is going to be an area of resistance versus Bitcoin. Has had a lot of trouble getting above that. It was looking really good here recently. It was really strong, especially NEM was one of the early ones out the gate following the fork. And so I was really bullish on NEM. I thought it was going to just keep moving. Had this 2-day 42% upside move. Then it hit this resistance and was pausing for a couple of days. 10 EMA was catching up. That was all looking very nice, very bullish, and then it just started to break down. Couldn't clear that resistance, and since then we've seen this big breakdown. Every rally has been sold into so far. So right now, I am not bullish on NEM. Now, if you look at NEM versus the dollar, it's going up a little bit, and that's a lot of Bitcoin because, you know, it hasn't really crashed per se versus Bitcoin, but it's not been doing pretty good here in recent days, especially this breakdown. This breakdown took it down 40%, 39%. So that was a big move to the downside in a number of, 3 or 4 days there. So I am not, I've got a little bit of NEM, but I wouldn't call it a position. It's just kind of some NEM I've had in a wallet for a long time. It's not definitely one of my core positions at this time, but I'm watching it because it could start to move here if we can turn this around. So on the upside, right, it's starting to put in a little bit of a low here. That's the area I'm looking for, but to be honest, I'm probably not going to do anything with it until it starts to clear these old resistance levels, and that's a long ways up. Now, if it starts to form a decent base pattern here, something recognizable that's showing some strength, maybe getting in on an early entry. But at this point, I'm not doing anything with them. I think I've got others that I'd rather be invested in at this point. Number 9, NEO. Speaking of those I'd rather be invested in, NEO is one of those, and it looks like it's starting to pull in a little bit here. So let's see how much downside we can see on NEO. Let's go to the charts. So NEO, anybody who's been following me for some time knows I've been bullish on NEO for a long time. Well, long time in crypto land and long time in this chart. So I've been watching NEO when it was AntShares, and that was back in this space. And I traded this little rally, but during this consolidation, it was probably one of my top picks, especially during that little bear phase we had in the month of July. And NEO, this was the equivalent of $7, $8 NEO during this little phase here. And I was very bullish on it, and I was accumulating it. We had since finally broke out, had that nice move up, and now we're consolidating again. And it's actually a pretty decent consolidation. Again, had this huge rally, went from $8 up to $50+ 57 or something, and then it just started to pull in. And now we're consolidating. The low so far has been this 0.08 is really the area that it's really starting to hold. We had this little temporary dip below, But on the closing basis, these are the levels I'm really watching, right? So the 0.085 to the 0.08 level is a key area to be watching right now. That has served as a level of support, and it's starting to line up with some of these moving averages. So I think that's going to be the first line of defense, this little zone right here. If we break down below that, 0.065 is probably the low, or I think I'm going to be looking at making some big purchases if it breaks down below that. I am currently holding NEO. I think it's one of my core holdings. I like the pullback. I like the low volume on the downside. I mean, especially here in recent past. So far, it's been contained. It's just kind of just drifting. It could be putting in another long base here, right? And those are hard to wait through, but they're very often worth it because, I mean, look at what happens when they finally break out. You wait a month and a half so that you can ride 11 days of 378% gain. And can I wait a month and a half to ride 307% gain? Absolutely. That's certainly worth the wait, but it's not easy waiting, especially when other things start running and you're seeing other things break out to new highs. It's not easy, and I get that. And so it's a lot of patience, a lot of discipline. But so far, the action is okay. I wish it was going higher and marching along again, but at the same time, hey, these long bases set up some good springboards to move higher on. If we look at the dollar chart here, again, there's not a lot of history on this one, but you can see where we peaked out around 57 or so in this exchange, and then just kind of been back and forth. Right at the 10 EMA right here, it has dipped below. So just watching this one right now, again, the level on the dollar that I'd be looking for, I don't want to see it close below $34 here, and that's still a little bit of a ways down. Even from this point, you're 10-11% on the downside. On the upside, it was looking like it wanted to start moving here, but it hasn't really done it. So the levels I'm looking at is if you can start to break above this little consolidation here. So if we can start to close around this $44 mark and start to move higher, that's going to be a good sign. We could be rounding out a little bit of a base here and starting to head higher on this one. Let's go back to the BTC chart and zoom in a little bit to look a little bit more of those levels a little closely. So you can see here, last couple of days just really tried to rally, but a lot of selling showed up at these levels. And so on the 4-hour chart, this level here, I think that's 0.01 is what it lines up to. Yep. So that 0.01 area has been a little bit of an area of resistance. If we can start to close above 0.01 level, that's going to be very good for NEO versus Bitcoin. So that's the key area that I'm watching to the upside. If we can start to move above that, things are going to look like they want to start moving up again. But on the flip side, if it stays in this little channel that's in and just starts to build a little base and start to edge up, I'm okay with that too. I mean, I think that's very healthy, very strong. Let me go back to that daily chart here on this one. You can see this moving average starting to catch up a little bit on NEO. So if we see this trend continue and it holds flat, this moving average is going to catch up here, and that's, you're looking at September 8th or longer before then. So are you willing to hold NEO until that point unless it breaks down? If we see that consolidation last that long, I think that's going to be very healthy and it's going to set up for a nice move to the upside. Number 10, Monero. Man, Monero. I think one of my very first videos on this channel, I covered Monero, and it was breaking out of a base at $25. I think the market cap at that point was 300 million. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that video, but Monero has been on the tear here recently, so let's go look at it. And so there's a couple of things on Monero here. I mean, first off, the base versus Bitcoin was not nice. It was not clean. It was just very shaky to have these big moves, big down. So to be honest, Monero was not really on my short list of things that I liked at the moment. And it was looking like it was just about to break down, and then news of it being added to exchanges showed up and just changed everything and had this massive move. I mean, if you look at just from the lows, you're up 160% now at that point. So it's been a tough one to hold here, but if you've been holding it, it's very good. If you look at Monero versus the dollar, this is Poloniex on the USDT, this is a little bit more clean here. So you can see this little consolidation it was putting in right there. I mean, if you look at it, that was really kind of your early signal, this move up past that trend. And then it had the big move up and just a little bit brief pause here for a couple of days. And now it's starting to head higher. So I did take an entry on this little flag pattern just on my trading accounts. I'm kind of wishing maybe I would have put a little bit more into it. But it's not bad. It's moving up a little bit here. I think from that point up, it's 47%. So can't complain. 47% in 2 days is a very decent move. But again, it's just a trade at this point for me. I think it's moving higher. I'd like to see more volume on this upside, but it's definitely above average, definitely above this recent here. So it's not bad, nothing to complain about. It does feel a little extended here, but it's moving higher. The one thing that I'm looking at, and very rarely do I look at weekly charts in crypto space here, but that's a nice bar there, by the way. But let me show you on the Bitcoin chart. Look at this on the weekly. I mean, I'm looking at this very big base on the weekly chart, and you're seeing this big base just set up, and it's just breaking out above that versus Bitcoin. When I see that on the weekly, I'm thinking, okay, this could have a pretty good sustained move, even if it pulls back to this little level here at the breakout point and then start to go up. So one to keep an eye on right now. Volume was good, on the week. It was pretty decent, but I mean, this little bar is not that big compared to these early bars that we saw way back here. But that's hard to compete against. If you take that out of the picture, these are definitely healthy volume bars. I mean, they're way up there with the other ones down here. So very good action. Very interesting to see this weekly chart pattern, because you don't see this too often in the Bitcoin space, just because a lot of these are still very young, don't have that chart history. But this is one to keep an eye on, so I'm liking this one right now. So Monero was number 10. I said I'd be doing the top 10, but I do want to skip through a few of these. I want to cover OmiseGo, because that's one I've been watching closely, one I like. So let's look at OmiseGo. Now, there's definitely no weekly charts to look at on OmiseGo, so this is a very new one. You can see the first chart down here. It takes you back to mid-July and has had a very nice move up to the upside. This is, I believe, a couple 100% move. If we go back just from the day on August 1st, we went up 432% in 10 days. Very big move. Not unusual to see this base, and in fact we were kind of stair-stepping, and now I'm liking this long base it's putting in. So just like Neo, it's just digesting this move. Really long base. Look at the volume on this one. Volume is just really starting to quiet down. All the volume is to the upside, the big green bars. So until that changes, I'm very bullish on OmiseGo. As far as daily charts go, this is probably one of the nicer ones in terms of setups for potential breakouts. Now, it's had some trouble getting above this recent resistance, so this is the key level to be watching on OmiseGo. But I'm also liking the fact that it's kind of putting in this little ascending pattern here. Now it's starting to roll over a little bit here. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see these last 3 days are starting to kind of trail in a little bit. So not going to want to watch it get too much below this. If this holds, this is a very strong pattern. Probably one of my favorite patterns to trade is these ascending wedges, just because the lows just get higher and higher and higher, and eventually it's going to have to resolve itself before it hits this apex. So that's September 2nd. So if this trend continues, I mean, you're looking at just a few more days before OmiseGo is going to decide what it's going to want to do here. But I'm liking the long base. I think those are healthy. If it goes a little bit longer, I'd be okay with that too, especially if this 30 EMA starts to catch up. If it does that, I mean, I'm not sure it's going to do that, but that's a long ways out. If it does that, then you're looking at, mid-September or so before it starts to move out again. I'm holding OmiseGo. I like it. I like the project. I like the company behind it. So I think longer term it's got some potential. It quickly moved up the ranks in the coin market cap. So it's probably just digesting some of that and kind of clearing out some of the over bullishness. But $784 million, very strong for a newcomer. Let's zoom into the 4-hour chart to see what we want to look at a little bit more closely. So again, if I pull in the 50 moving average, I mean, all the moving averages are just really just tight now at this point. You're just looking at the trends now. because it's just kind of been going sideways. So the top for the breakout is still quite a ways out from where we're at now, and I mentioned that in my last video. We're a little closer now, but we're still 15% plus or so, maybe a little higher if you want to be on the safe side for a breakout, so 20% to the upside before it even breaks out. On the downside, I think we're really close to support, so this could be a good early entry, but there's really no buy signals yet. If you're not in OmiseGo and you're looking for a breakout, there are no signals yet. It's more of a just keep an eye on it, watch this one very closely because it's very strong, very bullish, unless it starts to break down below this. So I wouldn't give it too much to the downside. Like I said last time, I'd give it maybe 8-10% below that trend, and if it continued lower, I mean this low down here is going to be a key level of support, and that's 14% below. So it's up to you if you're willing to give it that much room. If you're a long-term holder and this is one of your core holdings, then you probably should. If you're trading it, maybe not, just because that's going to be a pretty decent sized downside loss. I'm doing a little bit of both, and I do have OmiseGo in my core portfolio just because I really like this one, and I'm holding on to this one for now. And so far, so good. And I believe that's going to be it for tonight, guys. Appreciate you hanging with me. We're going to watch these markets closely over the next couple of days. I think it's going to be interesting, especially with Bitcoin potentially making new highs. That's going to be the one to watch. Until next time, guys, take care.